Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I think we better get started. It's a few minutes past 2 o'clock. Can I just ask you before we begin, can you all check that your mobile phones are all switched off, please, and then we don't have any disturbances? So thank you, everyone, for attending this meeting of the licensing panel on Tuesday, the 17th of August, 2021. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Councillor Margaret Franz, and I will be chairing this panel. Also on the panel, we have Councillors Hasina Khan and Harold Heaton. We also have officers in attendance, Nathan Howson, Alex Jackson for the legal team, Tracy Brzozowski, and Charlotte Lynch from the admin. The licence holder, Mr. Faisal Islam, is present, and also Mr. Paul Lewin, Immigration Officer. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and the stream will also be live on YouTube. The web address for this is displayed on the agenda for the meeting and can be found on the Council's website. The hearing will proceed as follows. The panel will first decide whether to allow persons specified on Regulation 8 notice permission to speak. There is one request from Mr. Paul Lewin, Immigration Officer, and also one from the licence holder. Then, our Customer Services Manager Enforcement will briefly outline the application. Questions to the Customer Service Manager for Enforcement will then be permitted from the panel, the licence holder, and or legal representative and responsible authorities or other persons. The licence holder then will be invited to put forward any information in support of their application, including the calling of witnesses. Questions to the licence holder and or legal representative will be permitted from the panel and responsible authorities, other persons. The panel will then receive representations from responsible authorities. Questions will then be permitted to the responsible authorities from the panel, the licence holder and or legal person or other persons. At this point, the committee will hear representations from other persons. Questions to other persons will be permitted from the panel, the licence holder and or legal representative and responsible authorities. Following this stage, we will now provide the licence holder with an opportunity to sum up. Responsible authorities will then be asked if they wish to sum up, followed by any other persons. The public and the applicant will be excluded from the meeting at this point as we enter deliberations, and the YouTube stream will end. The licence holder and any interested parties then will be issued with a notice of the decision within 5 working days after this hearing. Okay, so I'd now like to formally open the meeting. I think you should all have a copy of the procedures. Is that right? By email or? So, first of all, I've received any apologies? No apologies have been received. Declarations of interest. If a member has a pecuniary interest, they must withdraw from this meeting. Normally, you should leave the room before the business starts to be discussed. You do, however, have the same right to speak as a member of the public and may remain in the room to enable you to exercise that right and then leave immediately after. In either case, you must not seek to improperly influence the decision on the matter. Does anyone have any interest to declare? Okay. Item 2, procedure. The procedure for the meeting has already been outlined. However, a copy of this procedure can be found on page 3 of the agenda. Item 3, application for a review of a premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003. The committee need to vote on whether to allow the person specified on the Regulation 8 notice permission to speak. So that's Mr. Paul Lewin and the licence holder, Mr. Faid Islam. So, do we now need to vote on whether we wish to allow these people to yeah. So, does everyone agree? Are we in agreement these people should be allowed to speak? Can I ask you to vote now? Yeah. Okay, unanimous. Thank you. So, we can now go to Nathan, I think, to present the. Yeah. Sorry, Tracy. You going first? I've just read that instruction and I'm still not with it. You'll have to forgive me. I'm not usually the person who's chairing these meetings. So, Customer Services Manager Enforcement. Tracy, would you like to give us your outline of the application?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the reason that you're here today, of course, is because I need to advise you that there has been an application for a review of the premises licence at Bangor Spice, Brasserie, Wigan Road, and that has been served on me by Nathan Howson in his role on behalf of the Licensing Authority, acting as the responsible authority. So the purpose that you're here today for is because you need to determine that application in accordance with the provisions of the Licensing Act 2003. I don't intend to read the entire report because I understand I've already read that, but I will point out the licensing objectives are there at point 4. And I will remind you that you do have a duty as a licensing authority to take any steps necessary to promote the licensing objectives in the interests of the wider community and not those of the individual licence holder. The appeal procedure is laid out at point 6 with the legal considerations at point 7. What I will tell you is that you must have regard to the guidance issued under section 182 of the Licensing Act, and there is some highlighted points there of the particular points of that you need to be considering. You also need to have regard to the Licensing Act 2003 and the Council's statement of licensing policy, which was effective from 2016. So if we go on to the application, so on the 21st of June, I was served with an application for a review of the premises licence, acting by Nathan Howson, acting his role as responsible authority. And that application is appended at Appendix 2. And the licensing objective that it is related to is the prevention of crime and disorder. What I can tell you is during the statutory consultation period that public notices were displayed and that no representations were received during this period. So members will note from the application that the enforcement team leader, together with immigration, made a visit to the Bangor Spice on intelligence. I'm not going to go into the details of that because Nathan's here himself in order to go through what happened on that evening. And what I can tell you is following that, there was an inspection that took place at the premises on the 5th of July 2021. You'll note in your papers the inspection record actually states the 5th of June, but I can clarify that the inspection took place on the 5th of July. So the implications of this report are down at 13 with comments of the Statutory Finance Officer at 14. Monitor officer's comments are at 15. And I'm going to just conclude by stating that the decision that you make today should be based on the individual merits of the application and the representation in accordance with the Regulation 26 of the Licensing Act 2003, Hearings Regulation 2005. And the decision must be made within a period of 5 working days, beginning with the day of the last day in which the hearing was held. And in accordance with Section 52 of the Act, the authority must, having regard to the representation made, take such steps as mentioned. And those steps are A, you can modify the conditions of the licence, including altering, omitting, or adding any condition. B, you can exclude a licensable activity from the scope of the licence. C, you can remove the designated premises supervisor. D, you can suspend the licence for a period not exceeding 3 months, or E, you can revoke the licence. And just finish by saying that where members decide to take the steps in A or B as of paragraph 17, that they must provide that they have effect for only such a period as not exceeding 3 months. And that concludes the report.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any questions from the committee to the licensing officer regarding that presentation from councillors? No? From the applicant or legal representative? Responsible authorities?
No, thanks, Chair.
Sorry?
I'll just say no. No questions, thank you.
Responsible authorities or licence holder? Are we happy to proceed? Okay. So now if the applicant would like to present their review, make representations regarding their applications.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as has already been pointed out in the report, I'm here on behalf of the licensing authority, but as a responsible authority, which is unusual in my sort of usual role. The details of this case are outlined in the review application, which I'm sure members of the committee will have read. The circumstances are that there was a targeted immigration visit on the 11th of June, which revealed that an illegal worker, Mr. Rupin Mir, was working at the premises. Now, it's significant that this was a targeted immigration visit. It was on the basis of intelligence which had been received, and I'll touch on why later in my representations. The premises licence holder, or the DPS, was not present at the premises. Another person, Jamil Ali, told us and officers that he was looking after the premises whilst he was away. It was significant to note that Ali had contacted licensing in February this year and asked for advice on how to transfer the premises licence, but hadn't followed through with that advice and hadn't submitted an application. As you'll see from the report, there's clearly no oversight of this premises at all. There were a number of licensing offences which were identified at the time, and advice was given to the premises licence holder about what he needed to do and how to fix those issues. And there's detail again in the report. Today, I don't believe those issues have been rectified. And in the night in question, Mir was arrested, and Mr. Lewin from Immigration Enforcement will be able to give you an update at the end as to how that case is progressing. I did go back and do a further inspection, which was pre-arranged with the licence holder. That was on the 5th of July 2021. I think, as the committee have rightly pointed out, I've made a mistake on the document, so it was the 5th of July. The same issues again were identified, the same licensing offences, and more, if I'm honest. It was very poor and ultimately resulted in a high-risk rating of the premises. You'll see at agenda page 31, there's a summary of that inspection, which, before arriving at your decision members, I'd invite you to read in full. It clearly sets out the issues at the premises. It was clear to me that Mir had been employed at the premises for some time. This wasn't accepted by the premises licence holder. On the night in question, I was told that it was simply because they were short-staffed. The person had been employed that night, and he'd not previously been employed. Clearly, this was targeted information. We've been told or immigration had been told specifically that this person was working at the premises. It hadn't been on this day. You know, the person will be working. We'd arranged a visit on a day which was convenient to us, and it happened that the person was found to be working there. Again, when I went back for the inspection on the 5th of July, I pressed further on this point and asked straight out to the premises licence holder. It was completely unbelievable that the person had just been employed that day, and yet still refused to change the story. Stated it had just been employed on that day. And I'll invite members to make their own mind up on the truth of that. It's still ultimately not clear who is responsible for the premises. It appears to be, and this is the best I can come to from my investigations, it appears to be the limited company Noibai Restaurant Limited. I'd advised the premises licence holder that that's how it appeared to me, and I'd given advice that an application should be made to transfer the premises licence into the name of Noibai, but still that application hasn't been received despite approximately 2 months having passed since then. That's everything from me, members. I'll invite Mr. Lewin just to provide a bit of an update on what's happening with the individual who was arrested. But if I can provide any answers to any questions, then
it's in a company name. Who actually owns the building, the premises? Is it the company?
The premises is owned by another individual, Ashik Mir. Mr. Mir was responsible for the premises from what I can gather from approximately 2013, but then due to some issues with ability to speak English and managing the company, that changed. I think approximately 2016, but I'd have to check my notes. So since that time, he remains the owner of the building, but the business itself is owned by, from what I can gather, the limited company. Now, there's only one director of that company, Rezwan Hussain, who is the son of Jamil Ali, who was the manager, as purported on the day of the investigation, or the day of the initial visit. It's quite a complicated story that's been given.
Then it should be in the company name, the premises license.
That's my view.
Anyone else, any questions?
Is it possible I could ask some questions, Chair? Yeah, it's just one, Nathan. It's just that you say, I think in paragraph 12 of the report, that you visited on the 5th of July. So is that like a visit after the visit with the immigration officers?
Yes, effectively, that was a visit to chase up on those issues which had been identified at the initial visit with the immigration officers. This was simply just a licensing inspection, effectively, and the same issues were identified at the time of that inspection.
It's just that I'm looking at agenda page 25, and it says date of inspection 5th of the 6th, 21.
Yes, that's right. I think I mentioned that in my presentation.
Oh,
it is
sorry.
just simply a typo.
Yeah, sorry.
The correct date is the 5th of July.
Yeah, can I just come back on that, Nathan? So just to be clear, there were two visits, is that right? On the 11th of June and then again on the 5th of July. And the 11th of June was the visit made primarily by the immigration officers in association with yourself. And on that date, a designated premises holder was not present, is that correct?
Yes, all of that's correct. Yeah.
And the second visit took place on the 5th of July, at which time the designated premises holder was present, is that also correct?
Yeah, all of those things are correct, Chair. There was some question about the, I mean, it's the same person, the DPS and the premises license holder are the same person. Initially, I was told that the premises license holder was sick. When I continued asking further questions, it transpired that he wasn't around. And then when we continued asking questions, it transpired he was actually out of the country. He'd been stuck in Bangladesh for an amount of time, but I'm not sure exactly how long. Obviously, then when he returned to the UK, he was required to quarantine because at the time Bangladesh was on the red list.
Have you inspected the premises since? Because obviously they would be closed for quite a while last year, from about October, I assume, because of the lockdown.
Yes. So prior to the initial visit in June, the 11th of June, we hadn't, or in recent times, we hadn't inspected the premises. So there had been the immigration joint licensing visit in June, then a further inspection in July, but then we haven't visited back since.
So we've not visited this year since, I assume, has it
Yes,
reopened?
no,
Has it reopened?
These visits have been done this year.
Oh, this year?
Yeah, so 2021.
And these issues not been resolved?
Not to my knowledge.
I've got an additional question, please, if I may. It says on the papers, here we are, we're on agenda page 21, about an Abdul Malik who produced a paper counterpart of his personal license, but was unable to produce the voter card. So I was unable to establish his identity. Do we know, does this gentleman actually have a personal license, or can we confirm that that was the case?
Yeah, I made inquiries with Preston Council to establish that. It was a Preston personal license. I didn't ever receive a response. If I'm honest, I have no reason to doubt that it was a genuine personal license. There is a requirement on a personal license holder to produce their license when requested by a licensing officer. Obviously, he failed to comply with that duty. But significantly, the photo card is the part of the license which has the photograph on. So the paper part of the license is neither here nor there, really.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Nathan. Does anyone have any additional questions before we move on? Tracy?
On that, the two inspections have been clarified. I'm right in saying that there was actually an engagement with the premises earlier in the year, with regard to advice that was being given. Is that correct? Perhaps just remind members what that was.
Yeah, I mean, it was fairly straightforward. A request from Jamil Ali as to how to transfer the license. Then emailed advice was given on how to do that, but nothing came of that inquiry.
Nathan, how do you actually spell nudge by?
I'm not an expert. I believe it's NOIBHAI, Restaurant Limited. Perhaps the premises license holder will give you a better idea. Perhaps, Chair, if Paul Lewin might be able to give you an update regarding the overstay.
Yes, please.
In regards to the male that was encountered working illegally, he was arrested and detained that evening with the intention of removing him back to Bangladesh as he'd overstayed his leave in the UK. Given that he had no permission to work, so on that basis, a Q&A was conducted with himself and the person who'd identified themselves as the manager at the premise that evening. A civil penalty was served to the business for illegal working. That's still outstanding. I've contacted the civil penalties team within the Home Office yesterday, and they corresponded with me to say that that's still outstanding and they're still carrying out checks. So that's not been decided on as it stands. Ripon Mir, the person who was detained, he is now on immigration bail. He was due to be removed last month, but has made an appeal against that. So he is, as I say, currently on immigration bail.
Just fighting my IT system, I beg your pardon. Just bear with me 1 second. So, moving on. We'll now move to question. Where are we? Have we any further questions for Tracy or for Nathan?
I suppose it would be appropriate to ask the premises licence holder if he wishes to ask any questions of the immigration officer. Yeah.
I think we've not yet had the licence holder now. Sorry about that. Can I ask the licence holders any questions you'd like to put to the immigration officer? Thank you. And now we'd like to invite the licence holder to make his case, please, to the committee.
Well, what was at the time of this incident? I was away, so I didn't know that this illegal person was hired. And then when I got back, then I found out that this was happening. So I wasn't really sure what was going on, to be honest. And when I left, I've left somebody in charge to look after the bar for me. And then when I come back, I had a meeting with Nathan. He told me what was going on. And that's it really, and I don't know what else to say, to be honest.
Do you have anything further to add to that before we open it to questions?
No.
Councillor Khan?
I just find it very strange that you didn't leave anybody specific in charge while you were away to run your business or look after it correctly. How is that the case? That you're so irresponsible.
Be behind, to run the bar for me.
No, but what about the staff? It's very serious to take on somebody who's illegal. Who checks the paperwork?
That's the director checks. I only do the bar.
So who was meant to check the paperwork?
The director is supposed to check the paperwork.
That's not down to you then, no?
I don't employ people, no.
But surely you'd know who was in charge, that everything was left behind correctly while you were away.
Well, the chef employed him. And even when it was the thingy happened, I think the chef told him as well, he employed him as well. Because at the time of the raid, I wasn't here, so I didn't know what was happening.
Okay, thank you.
Please do.
Have you been have run the restaurant for this? How long have you been there?
Been there from day one to
On what date? What year?
it must have been about 8 years.
Sorry?
About 8 years.
80s?
8 years.
Of what? How long? What I'm asking you is, how long have you run that restaurant?
About 8 years.
8 years. Sorry, I thought you said the 18th. So you've been there 8 years,
Or maybe more, I'm not.
right? So you should know how that restaurant runs. Yes.
I only deal with the bar part though.
Right. That's why the premises license.
Yeah.
That's
It's
why
just
you're
that
here.
I don't hire people. I don't employ people. I don't sack people. The hiring is not my department.
Right. So should you not be there when that restaurant is open?
Yes.
So who authorised the restaurant to open when you weren't there?
Or I left somebody with the DPS in my absence.
They were running it
Yeah.
but on your behalf.
On my behalf, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Tracy, you.
So can I just clarify? You are both the premises license holder and the designated premises supervisor. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you didn't make any arrangements to have another designated premises supervisor to stand in your absence.
Not the. I left.
It was still your role. You were still the legal designated premises
Yes,
supervisor. So you were the person responsible not just for every sale of alcohol, but also for the late night refreshment and any other regulated entertainment, regulated activity. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what arrangements did you put in place when you went away?
Oh, we don't do no late night, no nothing. We only serve alcohol the time we're open till 11 o'clock, and we don't do no late nights activities or anything. And the guy I left in, well, to my knowledge, like if I'm not here or if some licensed DPS not there, they can leave somebody in charge who's got a personal license to run it for you while you are away or off work sick. That was to my knowledge.
So when did you go away?
March.
So in reality, you didn't know what was going on at the restaurant during the time you went away between March and
June.
June. You weren't in direct control of those premises. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's obviously quite a complicated business, this. If I can just summarise and perhaps, Nathan, you can correct me if I've got this wrong, because I think it's important to be really clear on this. This Noi Bai restaurant runs the business, is that correct?
Yes.
Ashik Mia owns the premises and himself works there as a chef, is that
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Rezwan Hussain is I think he's the only director, you said, of
There's a company director, yes.
Business, and his father is Jamal Ali, who was there at the time of the visits. So you, Faisal, are the bar manager in the DPS. But is it Hussain who is actually in charge of the business for the, I don't know what it's called now. The business that owns the Noi Bai restaurant, sorry. So Mr. Hussain is in charge of the business for the Noi Bai restaurant, is that correct?
Yes.
So would you have gone to him to say you need to make arrangements for a DPS while I'm away?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, did he make any attempt to
But
bring in a,
before I went, they had somebody in who's got a person's license.
and would that be Mr. Abdul Malik?
Malik, yes.
So he, in effect, would be fulfilling that role while you were not
While I was
there?
away, yes.
Right, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, Nathan.
Yeah, Chair, I suppose it's more to make a point more than anything. The person who the premises license holder says is responsible is almost an academic point at this stage. The person who is the premises license holder, the person who is the designated premises supervisor, is Mr. Islam. Ultimately, that's the person who's responsible. Now, the activities that they're carrying out may be different, and it may be that it's wrong in terms of what should happen on the license, but ultimately, Mr. Islam is the person who is responsible, because by virtue of the license, it makes him responsible. Now, I have given advice and things about who should be the premises license holder and who it makes sense to be, but ultimately, at the time of the incident, Mr. Islam is responsible. One of the points, and this is a point for you, Mr. Islam, you said that when you left the country in March, you left Mr. Malik in charge of the premises. Is that right?
Well, I've told them I'm going in March, and they said they're going to have somebody in place.
What do you mean by that, please? Who?
Mr. Malik.
So, when you left the country, what did you do to make sure that the premises was supervised? Did you employ someone, or did you ask?
Well, they had. I've told them before I was going away, and they had Mr. Malik lined up. So as soon as I go, he can come in and fill in for me.
Who is there, please?
The director.
So the director did that.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you just look at agenda page 21 for me. That's a summary of the application. In paragraph 3 of please provide as much information as possible to support the application. It details my conversation with Mr. Malik. And at the bottom of that paragraph, Malik told me he had worked at the premises approximately 18 months ago, but that he had been furloughed and that this was his first night back. He told me he was just here to help, and it was clear that he did not have any supervisory or management capacity at the premises, despite him producing his personal license. So when you said that that Mr. Malik had been put into the role when you left in March, why does that conflict with what he then told me on the night in question on the 11th of June?
Well, what is when I was here, he wasn't there. So he's come after. They said after I go away, he's gonna come in to fill in for me. So I don't know what this story is.
Okay, so at the stage you left, other than speaking to Rezwan, did you have any other involvement? Did you have any other responsibility, or did you make any other arrangements to make sure that the premises was adequately supervised.
So just I told him you need somebody to look after the place, or because by law you have to have somebody that who's got a personal license. You need to have him in when I'm away.
And did you personally do anything other than say this to Res1?
Well, I'll look for people that who has got DPS license that can come in and fill in for me by myself. But I didn't put it to him. I just looked for that if I could find anybody. Because sometimes it's difficult finding people because everybody's on their work already as they are.
And if you think, or if you were unable to find somebody to adequately supervise the restaurant, what do you think you should have done?
Probably inform the authority to say that I'm going away for a break.
Okay, and why didn't you?
Well, he just said he said that he's got somebody lined up, so I didn't think that I had to.
Okay. I've no other questions, Chair. Thank you.
If I may, Chair, could I ask some questions? Mr. Islam, how long were you in Bangladesh for?
Oh, I went in March and came back in June.
Right, and was it planned to be that long, or it would?
No, just I only went for about 4 to 5 weeks, and then I got locked down there, and then I always stayed another 4 weeks. Then when I come back, I had to stay 10 days in the hotel quarantine as well.
Right, and whilst you're in Bangladesh, were you aware of any issues with the premises?
I wasn't aware of any issues, but one of my colleagues rang me and said, "Oh, this what happened when I got back. I was quarantining then."
But is this about the visit, the inspection in
Yeah.
June? Right, but before then, did you know of any issues at the premises?
I didn't think there was any issues.
Did you inquire? Did you say, is everything being run properly?
Well, what is? Sometime I talk to one of the lads or the other lad, and they say, "How you guys doing? Are you guys going okay? Everything's all right." That's about it. But when I left, there was nothing. Well, to my knowledge, I don't think there was nothing wrong with it. And then when I went away, I didn't think there was anything going to go wrong as well.
So really, you like when you went away, you thought, right,
Everything's gonna be
everything
smooth.
will be okay.
Yeah,
So you
okay.
didn't really make any inquiries once you were stuck in Bangladesh.
No, I've only asked one of the lads when I rang him, "Oh, is everything okay?"
Yeah.
And that's about it. Yeah.
You said before that hiring staff is not your department. Has that always been the case whilst
Yeah,
you've been?
yeah. It's just that I can suggest to the company that, "Oh, well, we got somebody's available if you need."
Right.
That he'll make the final decision whether he wants to hire it or not.
So is it the case then that even if you hadn't been stuck in Bangladesh, even if you'd been back here in Chorley, you wouldn't actually have had any role in hiring staff?
No.
No. So you wouldn't have been involved in checking the immigration status of
No.
any staff?
No.
That would be not
No,
your
nothing to do-
department at all?
Not my department. No. I can
Right.
suggest to people, the company that we short staff and there's somebody who's out of work. If you want to hire him, then there you go. You have a look at yourself if you want to hire him or not.
The only other question I've got is, I'm really struggling to find this company on Companies House website. And the spelling is obviously, like a lot of Asian names. It
Yeah,
can
they
vary.
spell differently. Yeah.
Well,
So
how would you
I think
say?
it's the NOIBHAI.
NOI.
BHAI.
It's just that I cannot find that. I'm saying if it's a limited company, it must be registered, even if it's been
It is,
dissolved.
yeah, it should be registered.
But it's not. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
You found it, right? Okay. No further questions, Chair.
So would it be correct to say that it would be Mr. Reswaz Hussain who would be in charge of recruitment and employment at that business?
Yes, and the chef, Mr. Mia.
And that would be his father, is that correct?
No, the chef. His father is the manager.
All right. Agenda. applicant invited to briefly summarise? Does the applicant wish to briefly summarise?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not used to being called the applicant. Yeah, yes, please. So to summarise, Chair, you've heard the information detailed in the report. It was set out quite clearly by Mr. Brzezowski. You must have regard to the Section 182 guidance. In this case, it states that certain criminal activity should be treated particularly seriously, and then it gives a list of things that should be treated particularly seriously. One of those things is the use of a licensed premises for employing an illegal worker, which is exactly what's happened in this circumstance. It goes on to say that it's expected that the revocation of a licence, even in the first instance, should be seriously considered. Given that there's the aggravating factor of the poor management of the premises, obviously, I think even at this committee hearing, it's been difficult to establish what the actual reporting lines of the company is. There's been clear dishonesty from my point of view in the premises licence holder in terms of the length of time this illegal work has been operating at the premises. It's clearly not credible in any sort of stretch of the imagination that that person was working for the first occasion on that night, despite the fact that intelligence was received by immigration in May. We attended the premises at a day that was convenient to us. There was no intelligence of when this person would be working, and yet that happened to be the first day that this person had started working. It's simply not credible. So in the instance, I would invite you to do exactly what the guidance says and revoke the licence. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, agenda item 13, responsible authorities to briefly summarise if they wish. Mr. Lewin, would you like to add anything?
Little bit.
I think it's just the licence holder. No, Chair.
Yeah.
Some mistake in the.
I think I'd just like to point members, if it's okay, just remind you that you do have a duty. It is the duty of the licensing authority to take the steps necessary to promote the licensing objectives. I invite you to look at the legal considerations at point 7, and to ensure that when you're making your determination that you do look at the conclusion at point 16 of the report, and in particular the steps that you can take at point 17. And that's as much as I've got to say.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, agenda item 14, other persons invited to briefly summarise. So that would be you, Mr. Lewin, if you have anything further
Yeah, just
to add.
in support of the comments that have gone before, on the evening, it was difficult for us to establish who was responsible for the employment of staff, who was conducting pre-employment checks, and ultimately who to serve the civil penalty on. So as has been outlined in the application and summary that's been given beforehand, I'd just like to support those comments.
Thank you. Go ahead.
You say the illegal worker stated it was his first night. Did he keep to that? Did he tell you anything more?
No, a question and answer interview was conducted on the premises by the arresting officer. That's what he stated to the arresting officer.
He stuck with that.
Yes, and then I spoke with the person who was presented to me as the manager that evening. And again, there was a lot of confusion around who was responsible for the employment, so I didn't quite get to the bottom of it on the evening. Okay. But that's what was stated to us on the evening.
Okay, thank you.
And that brings us to agenda item 15, which is the licence holder is invited to make any final comments if you'd like to sum up.
Well, on the behalf of this incident, I can only apologize what happened, and I'll leave the decision in your good hands. What are you gonna do? But revoking the license, I think it'll be a bit harsh. That means you're shutting the business down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, we will be thanking the participants for attending, and we need to confirm that the YouTube stream